Hey, friends! Welcome to the Swing My Heart podcast. Come join me, your host, Nicole, for some hope-filled conversations about heartfelt entertainment that makes your heart swing. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Swing My Heart podcast. I'm your host, Nicole, and today I have a very special guest that I'm excited to be joining me, author Rachel Fordham, and a fellow postable for all you Hallmarky listeners out there. Welcome to the
Yes,
podcast.
super happy to be here.
When did you first know that you wanted to be an author?
So I think that I was always an author, but I didn't know I was an author. I used to pick apart endings on movies and rewrite the next chapter of a book in my head. But I always thought that writing was something that other people did, like people less ordinary than me. So I didn't really start writing until after I had one of my kids. My husband said, and I was explaining to him that I needed a creative outlet. And he was like, well, you read so much, why don't you write a book? And so I think the challenge and sort of that crazy, I just had a baby, hormones or something, made me suddenly brave enough to try. And I haven't really stopped since.
Well, that's awesome. And I'm glad that you are a part of the author community. You're a wonderful author.
Oh, thank you. It's been such a pleasure for me. It connects you to people that you never would have connected with otherwise. And I love that part of it.
Yes. What is the first book you ever read, and what was the first book you wrote?
That I ever read.
Yes.
Um, oof, I don't know. I mean, I I have memories of being read to as a child. So, for books, I'm sure. I loved,
Yeah.
classics, Anne of Green Gables, those kind of things when I was
Yeah.
younger. The first book that I ever wrote, was that the other half of that question?
Yes. Yep.
So the first book that I ever wrote is not published. It's on my
Okay.
computer. Maybe I'll revisit it someday. But the first one that was published was the second book that I wrote, and it became The Hope of Azure Springs, and it came out in 2018.
That's awesome. And I'm excited to chat a little bit about that book in just a few minutes. But who are some of your favorite authors, and how have they inspired your writing?
Yeah, so when I was trying to learn how to write, I wrote a manuscript real quick that was never published. But I realized that I could write a book from start to finish. And so I sort of gave myself my own writing course, and I pulled out books by Jane Austen and Charlotte Bronte and, some more modern ones like Julie
Yeah.
Clausen and things like
Yes.
that. And I just read them, but with different eyes. And I would say to myself, how did the author do it? Like, how did they do the passage of
Yeah.
time? How did they tag the dialogue? And not to copy them, but just to learn from them. I didn't know that I could have just gone to a writing conference or something.
Yeah.
So I would say that all of those authors inspired me because I had loved their novels and I wanted to know how they did it. And so when I needed a mentor, I went to the books.
Yes. And that's a great outlet. And Jane Austen and Charlotte Bronte are fantastic as well.
Yeah, which I actually don't think I write like them, but I still learned a
Uh,
lot from them and then found my own style. So,
yeah. And you mentioned you were self-taught. My dad is a self-taught musician, I believe. So,
oh, very cool.
yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes you just are like, I can do this. I'm going to figure it out. And
Yeah.
I think I was really willing to put the time in and to just write draft after draft after draft as
Yeah.
I'd learn something new and I'd go through the whole book and try to implement it.
Yes.
And it's gotten easier, thankfully. I'm on book
That's
7
good.
and it's much easier now.
Yes. You learn something new every day.
Absolutely.
What is your writing process? Do you first come up with a storyline and then build your characters, or do you have a type of character in mind and then create a story for that character?
Yeah, it's a great question. It kind of depends on the book. So sometimes, usually for me, it's been like a historical event or an idea of how to create a unique romance that is the catalyst for the book. And then it's kind of a series of asking well,
Mhm.
what if, until you finally are like,
Yeah.
oh, I asked it enough times that I just landed on a new story that feels fresh and new,
Yeah.
and then I run with it. A lot of authors do really extensive plotting before they write the book.
Mhm.
I don't really I kind of know where I want to start, where I want to get to, and I've tried to research any historical elements
Mhm.
beforehand so that I don't have to try to add that all in later because that would be a lot.
Yeah, I was going to ask if when you're starting to write a book, do you make an outline, or does it just come naturally, I guess?
Yeah, I think I do more of what they call discovery writing. I do obviously know like usually who's going to get together or those kind of
Yeah.
things, but a lot of it, I tried to plot it all out once, and it kind of stole like my creativity. Like I had no
Mm-hmm.
desire to go back and write it because I already knew how it ended, and
Yeah.
so I kind of enjoy the, oh, I can't wait to go write because I want to read the next chapter as I write
Mm-hmm.
it kind of experience. So I know loosely like some things going in, but not everything.
Your debut novel was The Hope of Azure Springs. How did
Mhm.
that story come to be, and what were the challenges of getting that first book published?
So that book, I decided that I wanted to write a book with the orphan trains in it. I hadn't read any other novels about it at the time, and it just seems like, and I had no idea it would get published. So it just seemed like a fun, not
Mm-hmm.
fun, because it's kind of a hard piece of
Yeah.
history. A piece of history that I could build a story around that would kind of be something that would resonate with me because I just sort of have I mean, I didn't
Yeah.
foster at the time, but just kind of always had a heart for children in need.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so I started writing it, not knowing it would get published, but I had to stop partway through because one of my kids got really, really sick. So I set it
Oh
aside,
no.
and then I went back to it, and it was kind of a cool experience because the book has a lot to do with like grief. I mean, it's a romance, but it has a lot to
Mm-hmm.
do with grief and working
Yeah.
through hard things. And so it was really kind of cool to go back to after I'd gone through this kind of family crisis and
Mm-hmm.
have that message be there for me. And so I did end up finishing it. And then I didn't know what to do next because I felt like it was a better story than I had ever expected to come out of me. And I went to lunch with a friend who was a writer that I hadn't
Mm-hmm.
told that I had written anything to. And I just kind of said, oh, so like if somebody wrote a book, what would they do next? And she said, well, they should probably query an agent. And I was like, oh yeah. And then I went home and had to Google what that meant because I had no idea. And so I ended up sending out submissions, like query letters to agents. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, miracle, miracles. I don't know how it happened. I ended up with a couple offers for representation, and then
Wow.
they found the publishers. I really don't know because I have so much respect for those authors who spend 10 years trying to find an agent, and that
Yeah.
just was not my experience. And
Wow.
I think it's probably just because I didn't overthink my letter and they were like, who is this girl?
Yeah.
So yeah, then it was just I kept writing
Mm.
and had a couple books ready by the time my first one came out. And so it's just sort of, I'm still learning because it just keeps happening on accident, I feel like.
Mhm. That's
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah, I can't even imagine all the authors that spend so many years waiting to
Which,
get their first book published.
yeah. And, and thankfully we have a lot of other avenues for
Yeah.
publishing now, but yeah, it worked out that way for me.
Yeah,
And I've had a lot of really cool connections from it. And so,
that's
I think
good.
there's different
Yeah.
things we can learn from every journey. In my case, it
Yes.
just was a little bit quicker path to that publication. So
Yes. And taking a note out of the Postables book,
trust the
trust the
timing.
timing.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So in my case, the timing wasn't waiting. It was
Yes.
it was just having it flung upon me and then going,
Yeah.
wait, what am I doing? What do I do now? So
Yes. Out of all the books you've published, what are one or two of your favorites so far?
okay. So that's a tough question because for me, they're kind of like time capsules of my life
Oh.
and what was happening when I was writing them. So I think I'll always have a soft spot for my very first book because
Hmm.
it was just everything about the experience was so new. Plus, I love the storyline. And then just meeting people for the first time was so
Hmm.
exciting. Opening those emails that came from readers was so
Oh.
exciting.
Yeah.
I learned a lot about myself as I got a few
That's
negative
good.
reviews.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole
Oh,
thing.
yeah.
So that was a really exciting journey. I mean, there's different reasons that I love them all. My
Hmm.
second novel, Yours Truly Thomas, connected me to the Postables. I had never heard of
Yes.
it. I started getting messages
Yeah.
from readers saying, your book takes place in Dead Letter Office. You have to watch this show. So
Yeah.
I did, and then I fell in love with it. And so that was super fun. So anyways, they all have unique things, but probably these last two, I feel like have The Letter Tree and Beyond Ivy Walls. I think that like I really like my craft just continues to improve. And then I think these ones just have some really romantic scenarios. So I really love both of those.
Mhm. Is there a character you've created that is your favorite or that you relate to the most from any of
Mm.
your books?
So I don't think that any of them are like direct like representations of myself.
Hmm.
Um I think I always have a soft spot for my really like kind of wounded characters or unexpected characters. So like M from my first book, you know, even as the writer, I was just really rooting for her because she's just had such a hard life. And I think in Beyond Ivy Walls, Otis is the main male character, and again, he's just got a lot of like hardship that he starts with, and I just was such a like it just felt so good as the writer to watch him get this really sweet happily ever after. And so I guess I'm just a sucker for those like the underdog character, right?
Yeah, me too.
Yeah,
Definitely. I love the characters that have a lot of depth and backstory to them as well.
for sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
and so those ones especially, and I mean, you fall in love with them all.
Mhm.
Some of them are harder to write because they're even more
Yeah.
removed from myself, you know, like
Yeah.
and Yorley Thomas, she's a little bit more makes decisions based on emotions than me. I mean, I think there are
Mhm.
definitely real like people like her. I tend to be more
Mhm.
practical, and so it was, you know, it stretches me as the writer, but
Yeah.
that's fun too because you get to jump into someone's head that sees the
Very
world a
true.
little differently than yourself. So,
Yeah, very true. How
mhm.
important is the title? Do you start off with the title in mind or does it come later in the writing process?
Okay, so that's a fun one because probably half my books have the title that I called them, and then half of them the publishers have changed the title on.
Okay.
So in my contract, they get the final say on the title, but they have to consult me. So it's
Okay.
never felt like they were just blindsiding me.
Okay.
And sometimes I
That's good.
really loved what they came up with, and other times I'm
Mhm.
like, I'm gonna have to get used to that. So
Yeah.
the Hope of Azure Springs was originally just Azure Springs, just the name
Okay.
of the town. And it felt weird when they changed it because it was my first book. And I was like, oh,
Yeah.
you're going to change my baby's name.
Yeah.
My later books, that wasn't weird.
Yeah.
Yours truly, Thomas, was originally Dear Azure Springs. And
Okay.
I thought they would maybe have them be more of a series since they took place in the same town and they
Hmm.
wanted to stand alone.
Yeah.
So my editor messaged me right before and said, hey, quick, give me another name. We want to pitch it as standalone. And I said, I'm thinking they're going to change it anyway. So I said, yours truly, Thomas. And then they kept it. So that was
That's
funny.
awesome.
So a lady in attendance was always a lady in attendance. The letter tree was always the letter tree. I think the rest of them have all had some level of
Okay.
change. So, but
Mm.
I am okay with it now that I've written enough books. I'm like, oh, that's
Yeah.
part of the process. But it
Yeah.
is funny because often when I come up with a title, there's a reference to it already in the story.
Okay.
When
Yeah.
they come up with a title, sometimes, so like Beyond Ivy Walls,
Mhm.
I went back and added a description of Ivy Walls into the book
Okay.
because
Yeah.
it just felt like, oh, well, people need that moment where they go, oh, that's where the title came from. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
yeah.
I always love hearing an author's perspective on how the titles of their books come to be. I think that's very
Yeah.
interesting.
So oh, and even like yours truly, Thomas, I went in and
Yeah.
ended a letter, yours truly, Thomas, so
Yeah.
that like people would have that moment. So
Yeah.
it is kind of funny. Yeah, just different. Every story's a little bit different.
Yes, very true. What do you enjoy most about writing historical romance, and what have you found to be the most challenging about writing in this genre?
Okay. So what I enjoy, I think, is that you kind of get to escape into another,
Mm-hmm.
another part of time, but it's not so
Yeah.
removed that it's like some obscure fantasy,
Yeah.
which total respect to fantasy writers, but I like things that are a little closer to home. And I think it's fun because you get to like feel a different part of history,
Yeah.
but then there's always this like commonality. Like we
Mm-hmm.
still feel the same emotions. They still get to have, like feel the same love and hurt and all the things
Mm-hmm.
that we feel. So I love that part of it. I love that, like, sometimes I joke that I was born in the wrong era, so I get to go pretend that I live in some other time,
Me
right?
too.
And then the challenges, I think, are um some of the challenges are reader perspective. Well, research is hard sometimes, but like sometimes people have like a certain image, like one image for what an
Mm-hmm.
1800s woman would be like or something. And so sometimes you have to like you might really know after all your research what it's like, but then you've got to try to write it in a way that a 2024 person would
Mm-hmm.
understand it. And then I get really great reviews on my books, which is so
That's
much fun.
good. Yeah.
But there's still always those people who will be like,
Mm-hmm.
not how they would act.
Yeah.
And I always want to go back and be like, well, just because you have this expectation doesn't mean they'll follow it. Like, like we're supposed to drive 50 miles an hour when it says 50 miles an hour, but we don't
Yeah.
always do it, right? So
No.
helping people understand that
Yeah.
just because you think it was this way doesn't mean there weren't some people,
Mm-hmm.
occasionally alone together or whatever without a chaperone or something. So,
Yes.
but that's also part of the fun of it, is trying to figure out how to write it in a way that
Yeah.
readers will grasp too.
Yeah. Yeah. You were saying you always feel like you're born in the wrong era. I feel the same way too sometimes.
Right? Like there's those simpler times I'm like, oh, they just draw me in.
Yes.
So I think that's
Yeah.
why I like the Postables too, is it sort of has that like charming, I don't know, like everybody's friendly
Yeah.
kind of vibe to it too.
Yes. Yeah, of course, I love living in present day 2024, but if I could go back in time to a particular era, I think I would have to say probably early 1900s, around where Wind Calls the Heart is right now.
Okay, yeah. So
Yeah.
these books are right up your alley.
Yeah.
Yeah.
1920s, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Nice and simple. Everybody's, I don't know.
Yes.
Although when you dig deep, there is a lot of, it's never as simple as we think either though.
Yes, very true. We're both big fans of Signed, Sealed, Delivered. Your book, Yours Truly Thomas, seems tailor-made for the Postables, with one of the characters working in the dead letter office. Can you share a little bit about that story with my
Yeah.
listeners? And what did you think of the new movie that just
Okay.
premiered?
So for that book, I was actually touring a post office in the Midwest, just like we were visiting some historical sites, and the tour guide said, yeah, if people can't find, if these old postal workers can figure out where a letter went, which was really common because people would just be like the blue house on the corner or something, and then they would get sent back to the dead letter office. And because those were the only people who could open the mail. And as soon as I heard it, I just said to my sister who was with me, I was like, I need to know more about this. Like, this would be the best way for two people to come together. And so, I had this idea that like the same postal worker at the dead letter office, which at the time was in DC, would just continue to see these like lost letters from the same person and want to like help them find peace because she would get to read the letters. And so I just thought, oh, this would just be such a fun way to bring two people together. And so I wrote that book, and then it was funny because, like I told you earlier, like I just started getting all these messages from people saying, have you seen the Hallmark Signed, Sealed, Delivered? And I hadn't. And, like a lot of like some Hallmark stuff had resonated with me, but I hadn't watched a ton of it. And so I was kind of like, will I like it? But I'd gotten enough messages that I was like, fine, I'm going to watch it so I can tell people if I like it or not.
Yeah.
And we started watching it, and I let my kids watch it with me, and it just turned into this like summer binge. Like it was a few years ago, and we watched all of them, and it was just so heartwarming. I loved the characters. It was so fun to see the parallels in my story and these stories, even though didn't even know that they existed. So yeah, it was just this really like delightful like summer experience that we had, and I fell in love with the show. I've watched all of them, and most of them multiple times. Yeah, and I love Oliver. I have so much respect for Martha's writing in it. Like it makes me so jealous, not jealous of her writing because I just love that she does her writing, but I would love to have that amount of time to work with characters and have their stories slowly unfold. And I think that's what it makes me jealous of. It's I'm like, oh, I want to write a series now. Like I want to like slowly peel the layers back. So yeah, I loved that book brought me Signed, Sealed, Delivered, because now I have all these sweet little family memories with it. So the new movie, I had enough time that I had thought of what I would have had happen, and so I was like, hey, let that go. Because I thought it would have been so great. Here, I'll tell you my idea just so it can be out there. I thought it would be so great so Oliver and Shane, I think they would be great parents, but I can kind of see both feeling like maybe they were too old and like having some resistance to maybe that. So I thought, oh, maybe Rita and Norman should just find themselves like expecting a baby. And then what if like letters started coming through the post office that were from a former foster child to their foster parent, and they have to connect them, and they get really deep. I think they could be a really emotional letter storyline. It would tie into Norman's like past. And I think that discovering that they could be parents in that way would have, and maybe they even like go to a home where there's like a child who like is going to be up for adoption, and they just have to I just think it could have been really emotional. And I think that that's a way that these characters that are aging a lot
Mm-hmm.
because people are really unforgiving. Like they're very forgiving
Yeah.
of people's age when they adopt a child. You know, if you're
Yeah.
60 and you want to take in a foster kid, like people are like, that's
Mm-hmm.
amazing, right?
Yeah.
And so I just think that would have been a fun way to have
Mm-hmm.
them fall into parenthood
Yeah.
and maybe have a little bit older child.
Yeah.
And it would have tied into Norman's and would have been emotional. So that was like what I was like,
Yeah.
that's how they become parents.
Yeah.
Of course, how they did was great too. Like
Yes.
and because we've been so loyal to the show,
Mm-hmm.
I can totally forgive the
Mm-hmm.
fact that they're aging and sort
Yeah.
of the actors themselves look older than
Yeah.
their characters. But part of me is like, okay, we got to do a time up or something.
Yeah.
So great. But
Yeah.
I love it. Like I thought that they did a great job of showing kind of the humor and
Yeah.
heart of a newly married couple and the
Yes.
kind of the ups and downs and the figuring it out and that it's not right and wrong. It's just a Shane and an Oliver thing and they're bringing it
Yeah.
together. And I think that everybody who gets in a long relationship has to figure that out at some point too. So
Yeah.
yeah, it was great. It was super delightful. I loved any time that we get to see
Mm-hmm.
those characters together.
Yes.
I'm there for it.
Yes. Yeah,
What about you?
I feel the same way. I absolutely loved the movie, but like you, I did have to suspend belief a little bit
Yeah.
with the timing, which
Yeah.
is difficult because of the way that Hallmark has done it. Like we thought that To the Altar was the end.
Hmm.
We didn't hear anything for 3 years, and then we got The Vows We Have Made, and then we didn't hear anything for another 3 years.
Yeah,
And then,
exactly. And so that's
yeah.
where I'm like, oh my gosh, it would be so hard to be Martha. So
Mm-hmm.
even the things that are maybe a little bit like less than ideal, like she didn't
Yeah.
have ideal circumstances to
Mm-hmm.
work with. And so I loved it. And any
Yeah.
movie they make, I will watch. I know I
Yes.
will love them. The heart of
Yeah.
it is just really great. Um, yeah. But it is
Yeah.
also like as an author, like my brain starts spinning of like, what would I
Yeah.
do? And I had 3 years to figure it out,
Yes. Yeah.
So
It didn't take away from anything in the movie, but it is difficult. And I respect the way that Martha always writes the movies, especially the end. She always leaves all of the characters in a good place. And I think
which
that's,
again, you have to respect her because how
yeah.
much easier would it be as an author if she was like, if they just said, you have 10 movies,
Yeah.
to get
Mm-hmm.
one, make it feel like a finale, and
Yeah.
then to get another one and make it feel like a finale would be so hard. So she has
Yes.
done a great job.
Yeah.
I love that she gave the world such a like wholesome, sweet
Yeah.
story that still has like a lot of layers to it. So
Yes.
I love it. Yeah.
Yes. Very true. And the cast, incredibly kind. I know you were at Rama Drama. I was at Rama Drama. We both got the chance to meet the cast, and they were
Yeah,
all awesome.
which was just so fun, and
Yeah.
they were just great people. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I'm like,
Yes.
yay, you keep watching you keep making movies, we will watch them. We got,
Yes.
and it's such a unique community as well because
Yeah.
the fans are loyal, but they're also like just kind of, I think they're all just grateful that, this show has brought them
Yes.
together, so I think it's really cool. Like you don't see that very often. So
No, you don't. I think the Postables are a very special group of people, and I'm so glad that you're a part of the Postables
yeah,
family.
it's super great. So yeah, I loved it. It was wonderful. Now I want to write a series someday.
Yes. I hope you get to. That would be amazing.
It would be so much fun.
Yes. Let's talk about your new book, Beyond Ivy Walls. Without giving anything away, tell us a little bit about the inspiration behind the story and these characters.
All right. So here I even have it because look back. There we go. Beyond Ivy Walls. So this one just came out and it's a little bit Beauty and the Beast, a little bit Jane Eyre. For all my Postable fans, it still
Mhm.
has a lot of like sweet letters throughout it. It's not
That's
all
amazing.
letters,
Yeah.
but it's fun to throw in. It's a different way to communicate. And so I really love
Mhm.
using those. But my main male character is he had been kind of exiled from the community when he was young and he has to return when his family has died. And so he's inherited this
Mhm.
property, but he doesn't want anyone to know he's returned because he's not who the community thinks he is.
Mhm.
And so he kind of comes back quietly. He discovers on his property, Sadie, who has been working in town to send money back to her family, who's kind of in a desperate situation.
Mhm.
And she's been squatting in an abandoned building on his property because she has no place to live and she doesn't have enough money to stay somewhere and then still help her family. So they're both kind of like need each other. He doesn't want her to tell the community that he's there and she needs money. And so he decides to let her stay there as long as she doesn't tell anyone that he's back in town. And so that's kind of your like Beauty and the Beast. They've been thrown together kind of thing, but everybody loves a little forced proximity, and they both really need things from each other. So they're just a really like, it's very like romantic and healing watching the two of them come together totally unexpectedly. And so I just had a blast writing this book. And then I got to go to Iowa, which is where it took place. And
That's awesome.
the duster factory that she works at really existed. And so that was all just fun connections. I got to meet other cool, like kind of like every book brings a unique cast of people in my life as well. So that was really fun. But it's really romantic. I think that that's one of my favorite parts. Like I really feel like in the book, it's very wholesome and everything, but there's just a lot of really sweet moments as they come together. So I'm excited for readers, and so far they're all really loving it.
That's amazing.
Yeah. I don't want to give too much away. There's kind of a little bit of mystery in there, and some unique that bring them together and then also keep them apart for a while. So
I love mystery. I love romance. I love depth in storytelling.
And there's some letters for you too. So.
And letters. And Beauty and the Beast is one of my favorite classic Disney movies. So
I really loved writing this one. I love writing them all, but some of them are just maybe more magical than others, and this one kind of has a little bit of that. It's not a fairy tale, but it kind of has that journey of a fairy tale type of feel in it. So
when I was reading the synopsis to the book, I thought of Beauty and the Beast right away.
Yeah, it's funny because I really didn't fully get the Beauty and the Beast connection until it was as I was writing it, and I was like, this is kind of reminiscent of that. So it's definitely not a retelling, but I think
of course
for it you'll feel some of that like same feeling of between these characters and sort of that unexpected coming together that they didn't know they were going to have. So
it reminded me a lot of Beauty and the Beast.
For sure. Which if you like Beauty and the Beast, you'll love it. So that's great. But there's no singing teacups or anything. So
no.
Unfortunate. That's great. Maybe next time.
If Beyond Ivy Walls was ever turned into a Hallmark movie, what actors would you like to see play the roles?
So you'll probably have to help me with this because I don't know any of their names. But my main character has alopecia, so he has no hair, and then there was all these superstitions around it. So he also has scarring from some of these treatments that they tried. So I don't know who would look really great bald. I think he's still, attractive in his own way, but
that's a tough one. I'd have to give that some thought.
So we might have to like poll your audience or something.
Yes.
And so I did watch a movie the other night and I thought the girl was really cute in it from Hallmark. I mean, I'd say one of our Signs Will Deliver people, but I think they're maybe too old. They'd have to be like a younger version of them. So I'm not sure. I will just have to get a good casting director when we make that happen.
Yes. So. Hallmark, if you're listening, Beyond Ivy Walls would be a great Hallmark movie.
I know. I think it would be so fun.
Yes.
So, someday.
Yeah.
Or let's do a series, because then I could stretch it out longer. That would be more fun. I want that slow burn.
Yes, love the slow burn romance too. Hallmarkies, if you have any ideas for who you would like to see in these roles in a possible movie, let us know in the comments.
Can we start one of those postable campaigns, right?
Yes, petitions. I could start a petition.
Nobody does it like the postables. I mean, if they get a movie come back every 3 years. Yes. That's best.
I noticed that Beyond Ivy Walls has also been released as an audiobook. Do you feel this adds an interesting dimension to the story?
So all my books have been released as audio too, and it's hard for me to know because I have a voice in my head the whole time as I'm writing it. I think readers go in and they just accept whatever voice the readers have, but as the writer, I'm like, so I never listen to them because even no matter how good their audio is, it's not what's in my head. So I have no idea how good it is, but this one is unique that it's my first one to have a male reader and a female reader. So it's switching point of view. So, I think that kind of is fun. And I'm grateful for it. I'm grateful that they put it in audio because so many people do love listening to it. Like my husband is listening to it right now. So he read a really early draft and now he's listening to it. So I get his review of how it is, but when it's on for me, and then I start thinking, oh, I could have changed that and I could have changed
Yeah.
that. So
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. I haven't listened to an audiobook in a very long time, but they are great.
Yeah, it's not I like that you can multitask, but it
Yeah.
feels less emotional to me, I think, because when I'm reading a book, I think I like slow down at parts I want to savor and I speed up for parts that I want to hurry through. And so I like it for its convenience, but if I really want to just like have that immersive reading experience, then I wouldn't probably go audio for me.
Yeah. There's pros and cons to
For sure.
both sides. So.
Absolutely.
What is special about this book, and what do you hope readers take away from it?
Yeah, so I always hope with my books that the main thing is that people feel like it was a good use of their time, that they kind of end with that happy sigh. I mean, ultimately it's a romance, right? But I think that like kind of like, some of those postable episodes, like they're always working on progressing the romance, but there's often like some other layers to it. So I do hope that people will think about how they judge and treat people after reading this book. And I hope that they think a little bit about like sacrificial love, and doing what's right even when it's hard. Those are kind of some of the subtle messages that are in it. But ultimately, like I just hope they're like, oh, I love them. And special about it, I mean, I think that this one, so I said earlier, like I'm a foster parent, and this one there is a child, like a theme. He's looking for his missing niece for part of the story. And I think that it's special to me because, I mean, it's special because it's romantic and I love the characters, but also like I think I threw a little bit more of myself into parts of this, like into that storyline and that message of doing what's right no matter how hard it is, because I've had some really like I've just witnessed a lot of different things in the foster care world, and like the happy, the sad, and above all else, like there are totally different outcomes in every case. There's not one outcome that's better than the other for every case, right? But I just love it when people do what's right. Like when they put the child above everything else. And so I don't want to give too much away, but I do love that part of the story. And I think that's kind of special to this book, is just that part of it. So
yes. And I think foster care is very important, especially today. I mean, any kid needs as much love as they can get. So,
right. So yeah, and I mean, foster care didn't exist in the way that we see it now, but there have always been children in need, and so that was something special to highlight a little bit in this book.
Before we start to wrap up, I have a fun this or that game if you would like to play.
Let's do it.
Meet your favorite author or meet your favorite character.
Ooh, author.
I think I would pick author too. Unlimited free books or live inside your favorite book.
Unlimited free books.
I think I would have to pick live inside my favorite book.
I guess if I could take everyone I wanted with me, then that would be cool. But if I couldn't, then no, I don't want to go there. Yeah.
I think if I had to pick a book on the spot to live inside, it would be the Canadian West series by Jeanette Oke, which is what When Calls the Heart is based off of. Yeah.
Which is just happy and feel good. And absolutely.
Yeah. Enemies to lovers or friends to lovers?
Friends to lovers.
No, but too.
I think any trope can be done right, but I think enemies to lovers is harder to do right.
Yes, I agree. Movie based on a book or a show based on a book?
I can't think of as many shows.
Yeah.
I guess a show, because then I could write it and I could spread it out for a long time. So let's do that.
Yeah. I would have to say, I think
both,
a show too.
Right?
That's a tough question.
Yeah.
Favorite book as a film or favorite book as a TV series?
I mean, I think I'm gonna go TV series, because most of the time they have to cut so much out for a film. So if they'll do it right, they can have a series.
Yes. Yeah. I think I have to pick TV series too, because one of my other favorite shows is When Calls the Heart, and that's based on a a book series. So. Fiction or nonfiction?
Fiction. I mean, I like nonfiction, but I love fiction. I still can learn a lot of great things from fiction too, if it's written right. True.
Library or a bookstore?
Bookstore. I am guilty of, I should use my library more, but I
Yes.
love books and I don't hold.
We have a Barnes and Noble where I live, so
Perfect.
I could spend a lot of time in there just
Right.
browsing the bookshelves.
I know, it's great.
Physical book or ebook?
Physical book is still my
Yeah.
preferred way to read, but like
Yeah.
on a trip or something, I definitely use my read on my phone and stuff too.
Yeah, I totally get that. Yeah. I'm one of those people that loves the hard copy
Hmm.
in my hand.
I know. It's just like less distraction. It just feels, again, it's like more immersive of an experience,
Yeah.
but I'm grateful for them all because they all have their
Yes.
place.
Yes. Even with magazines, movies, TV shows, music, hard copy in my hand.
I know, whenever possible. I'm the same way. I'm like, it just feels like you have your friends on your shelf when you
Yeah.
buy a book or the DVD or something. You're like,
Yes.
oh, there they are.
Paperbacks or hardbacks?
I love the way hardbacks look on the
Mhm.
shelf. Like, as far
Yeah.
as like the convenience of reading, like I don't know, it feels like
Mhm.
it's easier to like lay down in bed and read a paperback. So paperback?
Yeah. I think I'd have to say maybe hardback because they don't bend as easily.
That's true too.
Standalone or series?
Standalone, if it's done, again, it's like if it's done well. I don't
Yeah.
like starting series when the whole thing's not out. That drives me a little
Yeah.
bit. So if the whole thing's out and I'm loving
Yeah.
it, then give me more, right?
Yeah. That makes sense. I think I would have to pick standalone too. I think I'm with you. If
Yeah.
the whole series is out, yes, I'd
Yeah.
pick
And
series.
you got to be able to carry the narrative the whole time.
Yes.
I don't want to read a drooping middle if I can help it.
As we wind down the interview, I have a segment here on the podcast where I ask my guest to share an inspiring quote or piece of advice. Do you have an inspiring quote, piece of advice you'd like to share?
Ooh, that's like on the spot. Let's see. I might have to just pull something from the Postables, right? Like
Fun.
a
Yeah.
or something. Oh, you know what? I'll open Beyond Ivy Walls and read you what the epitaph. That's like the little quote at the beginning.
Okay. Yeah.
All right. It says, "I have for the first time found what I can truly love. I have found you," and that's from Jane Eyre. And that's kind of the little. I think they called it an epitaph. Now I'm like questioning myself. It's the little quote at the beginning of the book.
I know what you mean. Yes. That's a great quote. Yeah.
I do love good quotes. So next time I'll be prepared.
So okay, that was a great quote to end off our interview. But this was so much fun, Rachel. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today.
No, well, thank you for having me.
I had a great time. And where can people find you on social media?
So I'm on Instagram, Rachel_Fordham. I'm on Facebook, facebook.com/Rachel Fordham fans. And I have a newsletter at my website, rachelfordham.com. And my books and everything are kind of anywhere books are sold. So.
On Marquise, Postables, if you're new to Signs of Delivered, make sure to go follow her.
Thank you, everyone. It's so nice to meet you.
Of course. All right, everyone. I think that wraps up my interview with Rachel Fordham. If you enjoyed this episode, you can like this video and share what your favorite book by Rachel is. If you want to stay up to date on all of my episodes, you can subscribe to this channel and make sure to turn on the bell so you are alerted when new episodes come. Thank you so much for listening. We hope you have a wonderful day or night wherever you are in the world, and we will see you next time. Love y'all. Bye.
Bye.